Chapter 270. Xiao Zhu always thought that He Yan was a liar. In other people's eyes, He Yan was righteous, forthright, confident, and generous. But in his eyes, He Yan was a person who could eat, sleep, talk nonsense, and was also a person who was greedy and stingy. Everyone had their own secrets. Although people lived in this world, they were not completely divided into good and evil. People's hearts were complicated and contradictory. But He Yan was probably the most contradictory woman he had ever met in his life. She was a pitiful person who hid in the darkness and didn't want others to discover her true heart. Compared to the brave and confident female general on the battlefield, she was just too different. It was to the extent that in the past few years, no one had ever connected He Yan with He Rufei. For example, the Fuyue army soldiers on the training field always said that their leader, General Guiyu, was more broad-minded than men, and that her conduct was more free and easy than men. She never looked back, and always strode forward. With her, the morale of the army was stable. Even if the sky fell, it would be the same thing. But Xiao Zhu knew that He Yan was not a person who never looked back. For the past, she had a longer attachment and affection than other people. Especially those good and precious memories, she carefully kept them and never neglected them. In Jinling City, Hua Yuxian would often ask people to send some newly brewed sweet wine to her. Every time she tasted it, she would carefully write a reply. After drinking it, she would carefully keep the wine jar away. Every season, the women in the rundu would send her clothes and boots that they sewed themselves. The embroidery was exquisite, and the tailoring was perfect. He Yan herself had not bought any new clothes for a long time. Lin Shuanghe sometimes saw it. He secretly whispered to Xiao Zhu, Huijin, if my sister he continues to be like this, will she become the next Chu Lin Feng? Xiao Zhu gave him a get lost. In Jiang City, Cui Yuezhi would occasionally write her a letter. He would tell her about the good things that happened recently, and also about Zhuchuan. She carefully read the letters and kept them away. In the wooden drawer in the study room, the letters were neatly stacked together. She didn't want to burn them. She seemed to be free and easy, but she was especially afraid of loss. He Yan was very sad when Mao died. Birth, old age, illness, and death were the norm in the world. Whether it was humans or animals, they would all die one day. He Yan didn't like to cry. She didn't cry when Mao died, but Xiao Zhu often found her sitting on the doorstep of the courtyard, staring blankly at the bowl that Mao used to drink from. He walked over and sat with her for a while without saying anything. He Yan was not as cool about loss as he appeared to be. Back then, after the Battle of Yuchuo, her comrades had died. Before that, she had forced herself not to think about those things. After returning to Shuajing, she had been sad for a long time. The only thing he could do was to stay by He Yan's side. At the very least, his name would never appear on the list of lost. In these 2 years, gradually, there were many madams who secretly talked to Bai Rongwei, asking if Xiao Zhu had any plans to take in a concubine. Xiao family's 2 brothers were very outstanding. Xiao Jing had been married to Bai Rongwei for so many years, and even after having a daughter, Xiao Peipei, he was still deeply in love with Bai Rongwei. He really couldn't find the time. Xiao Zhu was different. In the past, people thought that he had a good appearance, but in reality, his personality was too cold and emotionless. They thought that he would never marry in this lifetime. However, later on, He Yan married a military officer's daughter, and he doted on his wife very much. Once a cold-hearted person was enlightened and fell in love, he was far more attractive than a gentle and affectionate person. The thing that ordinary people liked to think the most was, if she can do it, why can't I? Moreover, He Yan had not yet given birth to a child of the Xiao family, and he was also a military officer. He definitely didn't know how to capture a man's heart like those cute and spoiled girls. Therefore, many people thought that they had a chance. Bai Rongwei rejected one after another on behalf of Xiao Zhu. She couldn't stand some people who were extremely bold, overconfident, and blinded by beauty. They used all kinds of methods. Xiaoju threw people out of the door a few times. One time, he was so angry that he almost caused trouble for the other party's family. Fortunately, he was stopped by He Yan. He Yan smiled and said, "Everyone loves beauty. I'm not angry, so what are you angry about?" It would have been better if he didn't say this. As soon as he said this, Xiaoju became even angrier. When Lin Shuanghe came to visit, he would always say, "Who would have thought that our Xiao family's second son, young Master Huijin, would be controlled by my little sister He? You have to know," he sighed, "in the matters between men and women, the one who haggles the most loses. I originally thought that you had the upper hand. How come after a few years, you've been trampled on?" Xiaoju didn't like Lin Shuanghe's theory of haggling over every ounce. People's emotions were not like war, they had to use military tactics to attack the heart. However, he had to admit that Lin Shuanghe was right. The soldiers in the Fuyue army always thought that He Yan was accommodating him and saying sweet words to him. However, in reality, he was always easily provoked by He Yan, no matter if it was a big or small matter. Perhaps, using Lin Shuanghe's theory, he liked He Yan more than He Yan liked him. However, this was nothing. In this world, it wasn't easy to have someone like you. There were millions of people in this world. Perhaps they were fated to be together, or perhaps they weren't. People were like grains of sand in a river. They met and parted in the blink of an eye. To be able to meet the person you liked in this vast and boundless world was already considered lucky. Therefore, there was no need to pursue the matter of who liked who more. However, He Yan liked to ask him about this matter. She would often interrogate him at night, "Military Governor Xiao, you actually had feelings for me in your previous life, right? If I were a man, you would definitely be a homosexual." Xiaoju scoffed, "I'm not a homosexual." Ha, this person didn't believe her at all. The last time I went to the martial arts practice field, I heard Shen Jiaodo and Liang Jiaodo talking. They said that when I was in the Yangzhou Guard, before my identity as a woman was exposed, I already thought that you and I were in that kind of relationship. She looked at Xiaoju from head to toe, stroked her chin and said, "But with your looks, even if you're gay, you should be the kind that's very popular among gay men." At times like this, Xiaoju was too lazy to argue with her. Once the curtain was pulled, the battle would be revealed. It was late at night. She slept soundly. Xiaoju covered her with a blanket and rested her head on her hands. The starlight shone in from the window, illuminating a corner of the room with a faint light. He looked at the corner of the curtain. His heart was exceptionally calm. Xiaoju didn't quite understand when he had feelings for He Yan. He Yan always muttered about how he had treated her differently in his previous life when he was studying at the Xianchang school. But now that he thought about it, the care he had given to He Yan at that time was probably because he saw a lot of his own shadow in this youth. The only difference was that she had a bit more naivety than him. She still had to stubbornly persist in the muddy world. A youth who wore a mask was different from other youths. Because he insisted on keeping his secret from others, he was always alone. She was clumsy, but hardworking. She was silent, but optimistic. She was weak, but she had a heart of compassion for the weak. When he was young, Xiaoju would occasionally be curious about what kind of face was under the tightly covered mask. When he was taking a nap on the tree, basking in the sun behind the rockery, and drinking tea in the bamboo forest of the Xianchang school, he would always see all kinds of Hirufei. She looked so inconspicuous, so small, but her whole body was shining. Others couldn't notice it, but he did. Xiaoju had never doubted that Hirufei would be successful in the future. If she continued to be like this. But at that time, he was only attracted to her. He didn't like her. It was like seeing a star in the night. This star wasn't very bright, but it kept shining. Once it was seen, it was hard to ignore. Their relationship as classmates wasn't fake. So after Yuhua Temple, he would even help Hirufei's sister. The first time was an accident, the second time was a coincidence, the third time was fate, and the fourth time was probably destined. Xiaoju had never doubted that he and He Yan were destined. Otherwise, why would God let her appear in front of him again and again? And his gaze was destined to be attracted by this person. He Yen seemed to have never changed. The youth who pulled the bow and practiced archery under the night sky, trying to keep up with the team's pace, was no different from the boy who secretly studied in the Xianchang school. But after she took off her mask, she finally revealed her true self. She was confident and neat. She galloped in the martial arts arena to her heart's content. She was passionate and pure like a ray of light. But she was also careful. She was used to giving and was not satisfied with being favored. She was always at a loss when it came to more intimate relationships. At first, he only thought that this person was a skilled liar. Later on, his gaze unknowingly lingered on her body more and more. His emotions were affected by her, and for the first time in his life, he tasted the taste of jealousy. He would be happy, he would be angry, he would feel injustice for her, and he would want to heal all the pain she had experienced. He Yen made him feel that in this world, there were still many things worth looking forward to. For example, Lin Shuanghe always said, "Did you know that you would have a day like this?" He didn't know that he would have a day like this. It turned out that in this world, other than bearing responsibility, misunderstanding, betrayal, and killing, there were also moments of satisfaction. What he didn't know before, He Yen brought him to know one by one. The person in front of him turned over and rolled into his arms. She subconsciously hugged him with both hands. He was slightly stunned. After pausing for a moment, a smile appeared on his lips. What did it matter who liked the other more? He was even more grateful to the heavens for giving him this bit of warmth in his cruel life. It allowed him to meet his true love and be with her forever. He Yen liked the martial arts arena very much. After the Battle of Yuto, De Wei's army rested. For at least 10 years, Yuto wouldn't have the energy to make a comeback. However, they still had to train their soldiers. She was now the leader of the Fuyue army. When she trained the soldiers, she always reminded some of the Fuyue army's veterans of General Fei Hong. She was also agile and confident, but compared to the masked woman, she was more playful and friendly. There were also some recruits who refused to believe He Yan's abilities. On the martial arts arena, the woman demonstrated the saber, horse, bow, and arrow. She was in high spirits and was as dazzling as a pearl. He Yan was born beautiful. There were countless beautiful girls in De Wei's capital, but she was probably the only one who was beautiful and had such a heroic spirit. When she put on her red warrior outfit, smiled as she pulled out the long sword at her waist. She was either giving orders to the soldiers or instructing the soldiers and horses. The young people on the field were all stunned by her brilliance. Lin Shuanghe came to see Xiaoju twice, and both times he felt the crisis for Xiaoju. He only knew that when Xiaoju was in the Yangzhou Guards, she was a woman dressed as a man, and the brothers in the barracks didn't know her identity. Now she was dressed as a woman and mingled with these young men every day. These young men who were as passionate as fire almost didn't hide their love for her. He Yan didn't feel it. In her eyes, these young men were no different from Wang Ba and the others in the past. They were all good men, good brothers. After the Battle of Yuto, half of the brothers in the Liang province guards left. The remaining few had been tempered by the battlefield and were now very outstanding. Even in the Liang province guards, they were outstanding. Jiang Jiao's dojo became famous because of Jiang Jiao. Dojo Master Jiang was proud of Jiang Jiao. Most of Wang Ba's money was sent back to the bandit stronghold. The bandit stronghold he used to live in was no longer a bandit, and the fish pond he dug was quite profitable. It was said that the bandit stronghold often adopted orphans that no one wanted. Wang Ba would occasionally visit the stronghold. His temper was much better now, and even children dared to get close to him. Xiao Mai grew the fastest after Shi Tu left. In the past, with Shi Tu's protection, he was still a playful young man who only thought about delicious food. Now, he was much more mature. His archery skills improved by leaps and bounds, and he was now even more accurate than Shi Tu. He was also not as greedy as before. When he talked to He Yan, he was much quieter and not as cheerful as before. He Yan felt a sense of loss, but people had to grow up. Fate pushed people onto their own paths. Some people would never change, and some people would slowly grow up. Time was like the wind. It was impossible to stop them. She flipped over and dismounted from her horse. Just now, she had demonstrated that the arrow in her hand had hit the bullseye. It was beautiful and dazzling. The young man who picked up the arrow looked at her. His eyes were filled with admiration. He said half shyly and half excitedly, "General, you're amazing. You flatter me." He Yan patted his shoulder and said with a smile, "You should practice more. It's the same for you." The young man looked at her, took 2 steps forward, and called out, "General." He Yan turned around and asked, "What's the matter?" I'm not good at archery. Can you give me some pointers?" He didn't dare to look into He Yan's eyes. She had never been stingy with her soldiers' requests for pointers, so she said, "Of course I can. Try using the bow first." "I'll take a look." In the distance, Lin Shuanghe waved his fan and said gloatingly, "Brother, you can even tolerate this?" Xiao Zhu looked into the distance without showing any expression. "I saw that the men on the martial arts field were all scheming against Sister He. He wanted to see the world in chaos. You and I are both men. We understand men's thoughts the best. Look at that boy. On the surface, he looks like he's asking for pointers, but isn't he just taking the opportunity to get close to her? I didn't use this trick when I was in school. How can he still use this old trick? TSK. Hey, why did you leave?" He Yan stood behind the young soldier. Just as she was about to adjust his posture, a cold voice sounded behind her, "Wait." She turned around and saw that the young soldier was also shocked. He couldn't speak clearly. "Military Governor Xiao. Why are you here?" He Yan asked. "I'm not on duty today." Xiao Zhu glanced at the pale young man. Her lips curled up, and she mocked, "I'll teach him." The young soldier's face turned even uglier. He Yan didn't suspect anything and only said, "Then I'll leave it to you. I'll go over there and take a look." She left with peace of mind. The young soldier looked at He Yan's back and couldn't say anything. However, the man in front of him raised his eyebrows. No matter how you looked at it, his eyes were filled with unfriendliness. He said, "Go ahead and practice." Lin Shuanghe laughed heartily at the side. He silently cried tears of sympathy for the young soldier. When the sun set and the day's training ended, He Yan went to the room next to the martial arts field to change his clothes. He saw the young soldier from the afternoon again. However, at this time, it was clearly late autumn. His entire body was soaked, as if he had just been fished out of the water. His lips were pale. He Yan walked over and asked curiously, "What happened to you?" The young soldier stepped back and avoided her like a snake. He lowered his head and said, "It's nothing. I just practiced for too long. Thank you, General, for your understanding." He Yan looked at the young soldier's back as he left in a hurry. He thoughtfully entered the room. When he entered, Xiao Zhu was already inside. She took off her light armor and asked Xiao Zhu while holding her own clothes, "I saw that brother outside just now. What did you do? Why is he so tired? How can it be called training if he's not tired?" Xiao Zhu casually drank her tea. He Yan buttoned up his collar and said, "Even so, don't be too strict. I saw that among this batch of new recruits, there are actually a few who are quite talented. You came late today so you didn't see them. There are a few young men who are quite skilled and handsome." When they practiced their spear skills in the martial arts field this morning, they were very beautiful. She seemed to be reminiscing. Their figures are also very elegant. I think they're not bad. Xiao Zhu's face was so gloomy that it was about to drip water. He slowly asked, "Very pretty?" "Yes." He Yan put on his outer robe. It's probably because their waists are thin. When they fly, they have long legs. His eyes were almost burning with anger. He Yen. Pfft, He Yen laughed and pointed at him. Military Governor Shao, why are you so overbearing? Every time someone praises someone in front of you, you get so angry. You can't be so petty. She laughed heartily. Xiaoju understood that she did it on purpose. Even so, he was still unhappy. He pursed his lips and ignored her. He Yen moved closer to him and knew that he was unhappy. She said, "It's just a joke. In my eyes, there's no difference between men and women. But Military Governor Shao, even if you don't believe in my character, you have to believe in yourself. No matter how beautiful they are, they can't be compared to you. No matter how good their figures are, I only like your waist." At the end of her words, her tone was flirtatious. Xiaoju looked up at her. He Yen was becoming more and more playful. He probably thought that since they were an old married couple, there was no need to put on an act. However, every time she said something unintentional or flirtatious, it would always cause ripples in his heart. He snorted and raised his eyebrows. Wait. Wait for what? Xiaoju didn't answer her. He Yen understood at night. After a night of intense sex, Qing Mei asked someone to bring in hot water. She took a bath and rolled into Xiaoju's arms. She whined, "Tell me, if I have a child in the future, will they look like you or me?" Without waiting for Xiaoju to speak, she said to herself, "Forget it. They'll look like you. I've thought about it. No matter if it's a boy or a girl, as long as they look like you, they'll be beautiful." Xiaoju didn't care much about appearance. Lin Shuanghe said that people didn't care about what they had. Appearance, family background, intelligence, or martial arts were all things to him. They weren't important. If they had a child in the future, Xiaoju thought that it would be fine as long as the child was happy. He Yan had been married to him for a few years, but they didn't have a child yet. When she went to the Liang Province Guards, she trained with the new recruits every day. In order to not be discovered, she went to the Wulu River to take a cold bath in the cold weather. She also ran around to fight in Jiuchuan. In the end, she hurt her body. Lin Shuanghe wrote a prescription for her, and she slowly nursed her body back to health. Xiao family's relatives, such as Qing Li Su's mother, always asked why He Yan wasn't pregnant yet. There were even people who didn't know what was good for them who went to buy Rongwei and hinted that since He Yan couldn't give birth, it would be better for Xiaoju to take in a concubine first. After all, second young master Xiao couldn't be childless. Xiaoju, who happened to pass by, said coldly in front of the person who spoke, "Do you think that just any Tom, Dick, or Harry can give birth to a Xiao family's child?" He hated this kind of scheming. Xiaoju didn't have many fantasies about children. If he really liked children in the future, it would be because they were He Yan's child. It would have nothing to do with anything else. Who said that men had to have children? Xiao Jing married by Rongwei back then, but he didn't have a child for many years. So what? Xiao family's men only married and had children because they loved them. If it was for the sake of having children, they would reproduce instinctively. How different were they from beasts? If He Yan didn't have children in the future, then he wouldn't have children. He would just focus on dealing with her for the rest of his life. He Yan didn't know what he was thinking. She always had beautiful expectations for these things. Moreover, she always thought that if God was willing to give her and Xiaoju 2 lives together, then he wouldn't be stingy with giving them the best ending. Yunsheng has been a bit distracted recently. He Yan began to worry about other things. He looks so depressed. Did he get bullied outside? I've been busy training the soldiers all day, so I didn't have time to take care of him these days. Do you know what happened to him? Xiaoju was speechless for a moment. She reminded her, Song Tao Tao hasn't been to He residence for half a month. Song Tao Tao liked He Yunsheng. She almost told the entire Shuo capital that she liked him. This child's love was also direct. She was swift and decisive. When she liked him, she gave He Yunqing things. She gave him clothes, food, housing, and transportation. She wasn't reserved at all. He Yan admired her, but she also sympathized with Song Taotao's parents. They had to worry so much. Moreover, He Yunqing, that brat, was still so cold. But, she turned to Xiao Zhu and said in surprise, "You mean, Yunqing likes Tao Tao?" Xiao Zhu smiled as a tacit admission. He Yan was shocked. Looking at He Yunqing's bad temper towards the little girl, she really couldn't tell that he liked her. He Yan really couldn't tell that He Yunqing liked Song Tao Tao. After all, He Yunqing was better at hiding things than Xiao Zhu. It wasn't until a few days later that he came to He Yan and asked He Yan and He Sui to go to the Song family to propose marriage that He Yan realized that Xiao Zhu was telling the truth. "Do you really like Song Tao Tao?" she asked. "If you don't really like her, then don't flirt with her." "Of course I like her." He Yunqing's voice lowered. He seemed to be a little embarrassed. He blushed and said impatiently, "Anyway, if I marry her, I will treat her well for the rest of my life." He Yan was relieved. Although He Sui didn't have an official position, He Yunqing had a sister and brother-in-law who were generals. Although He Yunqing was young, he was already outstanding in his career. His future was immeasurable. Moreover, Song Tao Tao liked him, so the Song family was happy to see this marriage. Without much effort, the marriage was settled. He Yan originally thought that He Yunqing had offended Song Tao Tao. If he suddenly proposed marriage, he might be chased out by Song Tao Tao. He didn't expect that He Yunqing, who usually didn't talk much, was quite good at coaxing girls. Not long after, He Yan saw Song Tao Tao happily go to the He family to deliver food to He Yunqing. After the marriage was settled, the ceremony went very quickly. Other than the He family and the Song family, the happiest person was actually Qing Li Su. He Yan sometimes thought that Qing Li Su didn't look like He Yunqing was marrying a wife, but more like he was marrying a wife. He often came to the He family to help. He was probably the first person in the capital to have a fiancé like this. He Yan took the opportunity to ask him, "Why are you so happy that Tao Tao is getting married? Are you really not unhappy at all?" "Why would I be unhappy?" Qing Li Su smiled as if he had picked up silver. "That's true. Miss Song, now that she has been taken by Uncle He, I am free. Otherwise, I would have to worry every day that my family would pick this marriage back up again. This is called, it's better to die than to die." He was quite proud. He Yan thought about it. He was afraid that Qing Li Su would regret it in the future and accidentally make his nephew and younger brother into enemies. He asked, "You really don't like Tao Tao at all?" "I don't like her." Qing Li Su smiled and said, "Auntie, I know you and Uncle think I am unreliable, but I can still distinguish between what I like and what I don't like. Song Tao Tao and I are not the same kind of people. The girl I like, of course, has to be like me, able to discover the good in me. When Song Tao Tao saw me, she felt that I was not making progress. Trash young master, tell me, can I be her husband? Even friends need to know the occasion." He Yan saw that his words were clear and logical and thought that it was fine. Young people had their own thoughts. Since Qing Li Su really didn't have any feelings for Song Tao Tao, then things had come to this point. It could be considered a kind of perfect ending. She began to help He Yunqing with the marriage again. On the day of He Yunqing's wedding, He Yan was very sad. He Yunqing was the one getting married. She looked like an old mother who was sending her daughter off to get married. Tears appeared in her eyes. He Sui's father was not as emotional as He Yan. He Xining stood by He Yan's side and looked at her expression. He whispered, "Today is young master He's big day. Sister, why do you look so sad?" He Yan said, "I'm not sad. I'm overjoyed." Although she had family in her previous life, for many reasons, she couldn't get close to them. Even He Xining, who was next to her, only got close in this life after the fall of the He family. But He Yunqing was different. From the moment she became Lady He and opened her eyes, He Sui and He Yunsheng had become her family. Although they were poor, they gave her warmth that she had never experienced before. Now, the young man in green who awkwardly ate the pastries she gave him at the back of the mountain had finally grown into a mature man. He had his own beloved girl and became an adult. When people face things that are too perfect, they often feel unreal. Sometimes, He Yen suspected that everything in front of her was just a long dream. She was afraid that when she woke up, everything would be empty. He Yunsheng held the bride's hand and walked into the He family's courtyard. Immediately, there were cheers all around. The He family's courtyard was crowded. She had many friends, and He Yunsheng's wedding, everyone was willing to come and join in the fun. Needless to say, Wang Ba and the others, the instructors of the Yangzhou guards also came. By Rongwei, Xiao Jing. Xiao Ju stood on the other side of her. Like He Yunsheng's older brother, they watched the newlyweds walk into the wedding hall. Lin Shuanghe said exaggeratedly, even Yunsheng is getting married. I'm still alone. Qing Lisu patted him on the shoulder. It's okay, Uncle Lin. I'm also alone. Let's go together. Lin Shuanghe, the newlyweds were getting married, and the wedding banquet was lively. He Yan also drank a lot. In fact, other than during festivals, she was very restrained from drinking. After all, who knew if she would go and recite in front of others when she was drunk? It was fine if Xiao Ju saw it, but if it was spread to other people, including the Fuyue army, who knew what kind of eyes they would use to look at her as a general in the future? They would probably think that she loved to show off. Once she was drunk, she would reveal her true colors and insist on showing off her talents. However, He Yunsheng's wedding was a big day, so she still had to drink. When Xiao Ju came over, He Yen was already drunk. She was sitting at the table. When she saw him, she waved at Xiao Ju and shouted, "Military Governor Xiao." Xiao Ju helped her up and said to He Sui, Yen is drunk. I'll send her back first. Go. He Sui also said, it's getting late. You should go back. Come back tomorrow morning when you're free to drink Tao Tao's tea. Xiao Ju nodded and helped He Yen out of the hall. She reminded her, there are stairs. Be careful. He Yen turned her head and hugged his waist. She refused to leave. Xiao Ju took a deep breath and looked at the person in front of her. Lady He, let's go home. Military Governor Xiao. She looked up at him. From her appearance, it was hard to tell that she was drunk. She said, let me tell you a secret. Tell me. Behind him, in the wedding hall, the joyous laughter of the musical instruments gradually faded away. The night wind was cold and cheerless. He pulled He Yan's outer garment a little tighter. He saw He Yan point at the moon on the roof and say, I like the moon. He was suddenly stunned. At some point in his memory, she had said the same thing to him. At that time, he had not completely fallen in love with He Yan, but his heart was inevitably moved. She whispered in his ear and he took it as a casual joke. He did not know how much sincerity was hidden in that joke. If she was destined to hide in the dark, where the moon could not shine, she would just stand far away and hide the secret in her heart. The woman in front of him gave him a big smile. Her eyes were as bright as the stars. She reached out and hugged his neck. She whispered in his ear, I'll tell you another secret. She stood on tiptoe and gently kissed him on the lips. The moon is yours. In an instant, the moon was as beautiful as a painting. The world's fireworks and all kinds of emotions could not compare to this moment of eternity. The moon was lonely and cold. The moon hung in the sky. Until one day, he saw a traveler stumbling along the endless dark road. He casually sprinkled a ray of light to illuminate the road in front of the traveler. At that moment, he saw a beautiful world with a warm sun and rosy clouds. He Yen seemed to be extremely tired. Leaning in his arms, she closed her eyes and fell into a deep sleep. He stared blankly for a moment, then lowered his head and planted a sincere kiss on her forehead. Carrying her horizontally, he walked out of the room. The autumn night was long. The grass in the courtyard was luxuriant. Moths flew to the candles. The wind sighed. The man walked out step by step. The corners of his lips were curved. It was full of youthful joy. She did not know that the moon also had its own secret. She was the moon's worry. She was the moon's lover. She was the beginning of his heart and also the end of his love. This was the moon's secret. Chapter 271. The first time Xia Qingxiu met Yan, he was at the spring banquet with his cousin. Although it was called a spring banquet, it was actually just an opportunity for the noble young masters and young ladies of the right age to see each other. At that time, Xia Qingxiu was only 16 years old. Although there were young ladies of this age in the capital who were already married, Xia Qingxiu doted on his daughter and did not intend to marry Xia Qingxiu off so early. Therefore, Xia Qingxiu only came out to have fun with his cousin. It was the spring of April, and the grass was long and the orioles were flying. The tender grass by the Sisui River was furry. Xia Qingxiu followed his cousin Xia Qianqian out of the carriage. There were already young ladies he knew who were flying kites. Seeing this, Xia Qianqian immediately asked the maidservant to take out the prepared kites and walk towards her friend. Xia Qianqian was 18 years old this year. Among the group of young ladies, her appearance was especially outstanding. She was exceptionally sweet and beautiful. She also understood the strength of her appearance very well. She wore a scarlet tulle-embroidered narrow-collared dress that outlined her slim figure. In the crowd, she could be seen at a glance. Her family background was also the most superior among this group of young ladies. In just a moment, she was surrounded by people and praised. At that time, Xia Qingxiu was still a 16-year-old girl. At most, she could only be considered delicate and pretty, not to mention compared to her cousin Xia Qianqian. Xia Qingxiu was usually called a bookworm, and Xia Qingxiu was secretly called a little bookworm. She scrupulously followed etiquette. Among her peers or sisters, she seemed a little dull and taciturn, which was not likable enough. The relationship between Xia Qianqian and Xia Qingxiu could not be considered close. They were just ordinary cousins. However, with Xia Qingxiu, this dull and boring bookworm, by her side, it made Xia Qianqian look delicate, light, and intelligent. Xia Qingxiu did not think much of it. Seeing that his cousin and her friend were talking animatedly, he picked up a book and sat at the side to read. Xia Qianqian couldn't be bothered with her. After a while, everyone began to set up a long table beside the Sisui shoreline. On the long table were the snacks that the young ladies had brought out from the residence. They could eat here at noon. After an unknown period of time, Xia Qingxiu heard the young ladies beside him talking about which brand's new rouge color was beautiful. Now, they were talking about, young Master Yan will also come today. The young master of the Yan family referred to the current young master of the left and right vanguard's commander's residence, Yan Nangguang. He was only 18 years old this year. It was said that he was brave and good at fighting, and was born with a talent of striking appearance. At such a young age, his future was limitless. Xia Qianqian's father intended to marry into the Yan family. Today's outing was also a tacit understanding with the old master and madam of the Yan family. It was to see if there was any fate between the two juniors. Xia Qingxiu had also heard about this, but this was her cousin's business. She came out today to serve as a foil to her cousin, basking in the sun and reading a book. Just as she was thinking, someone beside her suddenly shouted softly, "They're here." Xia Qingxiu looked up and saw a group of youths approaching from afar on the bank of the Sisui shoreline. The leading youth was wearing a silver robe. This color was really too eye-catching, but he was handsome and tall, so he didn't find it strange. His hair was tied into a high ponytail, and his eyebrows were unruly. He seemed to be a little irritated and impatient, but it made him stand out among the group of youths. Everyone said that there were 3 beauties in the Shuo capital, young Master Xiao was like the spring breeze, second young Master Xiao was like the autumn water, and fourth young Master Chu was like an orchid. This youth was like a silver spear. It was a little exaggerated, overly gorgeous, but with a straightforward impulse. The handsome youth who walked out of the spring day was always exceptionally beautiful. Even though Xia Qingxiu wasn't very interested in these things, he couldn't help but take a few more glances at him. He thought to himself that with this person's appearance, he should be considered the fourth most beautiful person. Just as he was thinking, the young lady sitting beside Xia Qianqian pushed Xia Qianqian and said in a low voice, "Qianqian, this is young Master Yan. He looks really compatible with you." Xia Qianqian blushed inexplicably. Before she came, although she had heard of Yan He's name, she had never seen him in person. She didn't know what he looked like. Today, when she saw him, she realized that he was so handsome. For a moment, she was a little moved. The group of youths didn't approach. From afar, a few youths were laughing and laughing. They began to take out the prepared kites and began to play with the east wind. In the sky of Sishui disease, there were many kites, sand swallows, magpies, 2 dragons playing with a pearl. The silver-robed youth was surrounded and pushed by people. Finally, he impatiently followed the order to bring up Black King Kong, and held it in his hand. The Black King Kong flew very quickly. This youth was very good at releasing kites. The young ladies watched from afar and couldn't help but secretly cheer. However, they couldn't tell whether it was the kite that flew the highest or the youth who released the kite that was cheering for him. Xia Qianqian looked at it and suddenly stood up. She smiled and said, "Let's go release it too." In fact, before this, the young ladies had already released kites for a while. However, these young ladies from rich families were physically weak. After releasing them for a while, they had to sit down and rest. The rest was left to the servants. Xia Qianqian stood up and walked to the maid who was placing her 100 butterfly painting. She said, "Let me do it." The young ladies sitting at the long table immediately laughed. Someone whispered, "Looks like Qianqian likes it." Xia Qingxiu was a little puzzled when she heard that, but she didn't say anything. She wasn't a talkative person to begin with. She only saw Xia Qianqian pulling the kite's string and walking towards the river. Then, she saw that the 2 kites in the sky were getting closer and closer. She hesitated whether she should open her mouth to remind her. In the next moment, she heard her cousin exclaim, "Aya!" The string of the 100 butterfly painting and the Black King Kong were entangled together. They collided into a ball and fell towards the forest. The noble ladies beside her laughed even louder. They discussed in low voices, "Qianqian, good method." Xia Qianqian was still holding the kite string in her hand. Her expression was flustered, but there was a smug joy in her eyes. She was very confident in her appearance. If she wanted to capture the heart of a youth, it shouldn't be a difficult task. Her rouge today was very beautiful, and her dress was also very beautiful. She turned around and glanced at the silver-robed youth who was frowning as he stared at the entangled kite. She turned around and ran into the forest where the kite fell. At the same time, Xia Qingxiu, who was sitting at the side, put down the book in her hand and stood up. The noble lady beside her asked, "Miss Qingxiu, what are you doing?" "Sister's kite fell." "I'm going to help," Xia Qingxiu replied. "Why are you helping?" The noble lady who spoke covered her mouth and laughed. She looked at her as if she was looking at a fool, and there was a complicated sourness in her eyes. "Qianqian doesn't need your help now." Xia Qingxiu pursed her lips. In the end, she was worried about Xia Qianqian being alone, so she lifted her skirt and ran over. The noble ladies called her a few times, but when they saw that she ignored them, they let it go. The forest where the kite fell was not far from the river, but there were bushes growing inside. When a girl walked inside, she had to be careful of the thorny branches and leaves cutting the corner of her skirt. Xia Qingxiu struggled to push aside the bushes and saw a corner of his cousin's scarlet dress not far away. His heart relaxed and he was about to walk over when he suddenly heard Xia Qianqian say, "Young Master Yan." Xia Qingxiu paused. Only then did he see someone standing in front of Xia Qianqian. It was the main character of today's meeting, young Master Yan. Xia Qianqian's voice was gentle and sweet, with a hint of panic and apology. Young Master Yan, I'm sorry. I didn't do it on purpose. Yan, he just frowned at her. His gaze was bright and sharp, making Xia Qianqian feel a little guilty for no reason. Xia Qianqian grabbed the corner of her clothes uneasily. Young Master Yan, the kites are all entangled together now. What should we do? Xia Qianqian's eyes were shy and her voice was sweet. Xia Qingxiu finally understood that his cousin was probably seducing this young Master Yan. However, it was too late for her to leave now. She was afraid of alarming the two people in front of her, so she was forced to watch the next scene. At the same time, she thought that this young Master Yan would probably say things like, "It's okay," and, "It's none of your business." Then, he would comfort her softly and send Xia Qianqian home. After that, this marriage would be settled. That should be it, right? It's okay. Just as he thought of this, the youth's voice came from the front. Xia Qingxiu thought in his heart that it was indeed so. Raising his head, he saw Yan. He suddenly smiled without a care in the world. He casually pulled out a small knife from his waist and cleanly cut off the threads between the two kites. Xia Qingxiu was dumbfounded. She was not the only one who was shocked. Xia Qianqian was stunned for a moment before asking, "What are you doing?" "So we're separated." Yan, he put away the knife. "Don't worry, I'm a broad-minded person. I won't hold it against you for deliberately breaking my kite." Xia Qianqian had always been flattered by others since she was young. No one had ever spoken to her like this. For a moment, a sense of shame surged into her heart. She cried out, "Who deliberately broke your kite?" She slapped Yan. He lifted her skirt, and ran away crying. Xia Qingxiu was so scared that she did not dare to breathe loudly. She thought to herself that this young Master Yan was really unexpected. "Hey," someone said in an annoyed voice. "The one who's peeping over there, have you seen enough?" Xia Qingxiu was stunned. Had she been discovered? The next moment, that person had already walked in front of her. Xia Qingxiu subconsciously took a step back. Looking closer, this young man called Yan. He was indeed very handsome, but when he looked at people, he always had a condescending look. When Yan he saw Xia Qingxiu, he was also stunned. He frowned and said, "It's you." Among the noble ladies at the long table, he had seen Xia Qingxiu a long time ago. She did not chat and laugh with those noble ladies, nor did she fly kites. She just sat beside Xia Qianqian and read, like a decoration. "That person just now," he asked, "who is she to you?" Xia Qingxiu said, "Cousin." Yan he snorted and said in disgust, "Pretentious." He pushed Xia Qingxiu away and walked forward. Xia Qingxiu did not expect Yan he to suddenly push her. She was a young lady who could not lift or carry anything. Yan he was a martial arts practitioner. After being pushed like this, he took a few steps back. His hand accidentally brushed against a thorny branch, and in an instant, a red mark appeared on the back of his hand. Such a red mark on his fair skin looked very dazzling. Yan he was also stunned. He did not expect these delicate young ladies to be so fragile. They could get hurt just by touching them. He was a little annoyed, but he could not sit back and do nothing. He took a step forward to check on her injury, but he did not expect Xia Qingxiu to immediately take a step back. "You're injured, Yan," he said. "I know." Xia Qingxiu's expression was calm, as if she did not care about the wound on the back of her hand. Her tone was calm. But men and women should not touch each other. Yan he was a little puzzled. The girl in front of him was far less beautiful than Xia Qianqian. The dress she was wearing was light yellow, and she did not wear any makeup. She looked like she was still at the age where she did not know about love. How could it be, not touching each other? He said, "This little girl is young, but she's quite old-fashioned." Xia Qingxiu just turned sideways to avoid him. I'm broad-minded. I won't argue with young Master Yan about the fact that you deliberately pushed me. Yan he was stunned. After Xia Qingxiu said this, he turned around and left. Yan he touched his chin. This guy was avenging her cousin. This was the first time he was scolded by a woman like this. She looked gentle and refined, and it seemed that she was not a person who would suffer losses. After Xia Qingxiu left the forest, the noble ladies at the long banquet had already dispersed in twos and threes. Xia Qianqian was probably unhappy with Yan He, so she cried and took the carriage to go back. Xia Qingxiu also had to hurriedly follow. As a result, when Yan He came out, the group of noble ladies had already boarded the carriage. There was a book lying in the grass beside the long banquet. Yan He remembered that when he came, only Xia Qingxiu was sitting here reading a book. This book was probably hers, but she left in a hurry and forgot about it. He bent down and picked it up. He opened it and saw that it was a travel book. There was also someone's note on it. The handwriting was extremely beautiful and elegant. It reminded him of the girl who quietly scolded him in the forest just now. Yan he pursed his lips and said in a low voice, "Bookworm." However, for some reason, he put the travel book into his arms. This meeting with Xia Qianqian naturally ended without any results. Xia Qianqian's parents even treated Commander Yan coldly for a period of time. Commander Yan turned around and scolded Yan He, but Yan He himself did not think much of it. However, this marriage did not continue. Time passed quickly, and another year passed. Xia Qingxiu was 17 years old. Lord Xia was thinking that he should start looking for suitable young talents in Shuo capital for Xia Qingxiu. When Yan He returned to the residence, he heard his mother discussing with his aunt about matchmaking his cousin to Xia Qingxiu. Xia Qingxiu. Yan He stopped walking into the house and turned his head to ask, "Is it the young lady of the Imperial College's Chancellor's residence?" "How do you know?" Mother Yan asked in confusion, "Don't you hate to remember the names of these young ladies?" Yan He did not answer his mother's question. He only frowned and asked, "Cousin is 2 years older than me. Miss Xia is still young, right? In terms of age, am I not more suitable?" Commander Yan scolded him. "Miss Xia is from a scholarly family and is knowledgeable. Didn't you say that you hate people who play with words the most? Don't you hate bookworms the most? Are you willing to matchmake you?" Yan He did not say anything. He returned to his room and stared at the pond outside the window for half a day. He took out a book from the bottom of the desk drawer. It was a travel book. In the middle of the night, when the dogs in the Yan residence were asleep, Yan He put on his outer clothes and knocked on the door of his parents' bedroom. "Yan Nangguang, you scared people to death in the middle of the night. What do you want?" Commander Yan was furious. Yan He said, "I'm willing." After that, it was a long day of chasing. Yan He tried his best to please the beauty. Master Xia was very fierce and old-fashioned. Every time Yan He saw him, he was a little scared. Xia Qingxiu was even scarier than Master Xia. He was clearly a bookworm who did not have the strength to truss a chicken. However, every time he looked at him with his calm eyes, Yan He did not know what to do. Commander Yan scolded him at home. "You're usually like a gamecock. Why don't you know how to chase a girl properly? Why doesn't she like you? Can't you think about it?" Yan He could not think of it. He felt that he was quite good. He was handsome, agile, and had a good family background. He was one of the top young talents in the Shuo capital. Why didn't Xia Qingxiu like him? It must be because that bookworm did not know how to appreciate men. He was blind. However, he did not dare to say this in front of Xia Qingxiu. Seeing that her son had a lot on his mind, Madame Yan felt gratified and helpless. She could only beat around the bush. "Since you like her, you should treat her better. Take care of her more. Eventually, Miss Xia will see the good in you." Yan He felt that his mother's words made sense. However, he did not know how to treat someone well. The jewelry and clothes he gave were all returned. The love poem he wrote was returned to his servant the next day. Sometimes, he felt annoyed. When he first met Xia Qingxiu, he should not have been so rude and frivolous. It would have been better than trying his best to remedy the situation, but he still felt that the results were not good. As a proud son of heaven, he finally felt the anxiety of love and could not sleep. And no matter how he treated Xia Qingxiu, this girl had treated him neither coldly nor warmly from beginning to end. Therefore, when he asked Commander Yan to propose marriage to Xia Qingxiu, he went with a feeling of failure. However, he was about to lead the army into battle. Life and death were unpredictable on the battlefield. If he did not propose marriage, he was afraid that he would not have another chance. It was better to be disappointed after trying than to be disappointed before trying. That was what he thought. However, he did not expect that Lord Xia would agree to the marriage proposal from Yan family. He could not believe it. This was supposed to be a happy event. However, when it came to the end, he shrank back. If he died, wouldn't Xia Qingxiu bear the infamy of being a jinx to her husband? He walked out of Xia Qingxiu's house with a heavy heart. When he was about to leave, someone called him from behind. Young Master Yan. He turned around and saw Xia Qingxiu standing behind him, looking at him quietly. He was at a loss for words. Young Master Yan. This quiet girl smiled at him for the first time. She was gentle and sweet, like the spring willows by the Sisui River, full of warmth. Come back early, she said. He stared blankly for a moment, then inexplicably blushed. Under the sunlight, he stared straight at this girl. He stared until the servant girl beside Xia Qingxiu took out a broom and prepared to chase him away. Only then did he cough lightly and say in a small voice, I will. After taking 2 steps, he turned around and added nonchalantly, wait for me. Chapter 272. Every time he went to war, Xia Qingxiu would be waiting for him in the mansion. From 1 person to 2 people waiting, what they got in the end was bad news. In the first year after he left, everyone thought that Xia Qingxiu would wash her face with tears and be sad all day long. However, what she showed was a shocking calmness. Muxia was well taken care of by her. Lin Shuanghe often came to visit. Xia Qingxiu would still smile and do what she was doing in an orderly manner. Sometimes, when she woke up in the middle of the night, she would subconsciously try to touch the person beside her. It was only when her hand touched the cold mattress that she seemed to realize that the person who had warmed her was no longer there. Eventually, she would slowly fall silent. In the 5th year after he left, Commander Yan and Madame Yan took the initiative to persuade Xia Qingxiu to remarry. Xia Qingxiu was not old. It was not like there were no widows who remarried in the capital. She was gentle, and she was also the daughter of Lord Xia. She might have a good family. However, Xia Qingxiu politely declined. Xia Qingxiu said, I have Muxia. That is enough. A new, singing jade hall was opened in the capital. Xia Qingxiu often went to help. She arranged her life to the fullest and calmly continued her life without He often came to talk to her. Xia Qingxiu knew that she was worried about him. However, ever since she was young, she had a personality that did not make people worry. Just like the first time he saw her, she would never let herself be taken advantage of. 10 years after he left, Muxia already had the appearance of a young man. His facial features were similar to He's, but he was more delicate than He. His spear skills were already very good. Yan and Xiaoju would come to teach him swordsmanship when they were free. He often provoked Xiaoju. With a high ponytail and a silver spear in his hand, he said, Military Governor Xiao, in a few years, you will be defeated by me. Of course, he ended up being thrown onto a tree by Xiaoju. However, even though he couldn't beat Xiaoju, he was able to use the competition as an excuse to get back at Xiaoyao. As the saying goes, a father's debt must be paid by a daughter. In the 15th year after Yan He left, Muxia found a girl he liked. The young man was staring blankly at the thing in his hand. When he saw his mother come in, he hurriedly hid the sachet that his sweetheart had given him. Xia Qingxiu smiled and sat down beside him. "You like this girl very much?" she asked. Yan Muxia subconsciously retorted, "Who likes her?" His ears quietly turned red. Xia Qingxiu patted his head and said, "Then remember to treat her better." The young man pretended to be calm and looked away. With a red face, he said without much confidence, "Humph." In the 20th year after Yan He left, Yan Muxia married the daughter of the Minister of Revenue. It was the girl that he liked when he was 15. They gave birth to a daughter named Niao Niao. Yan Muxia treated Niao Niao and her mother very well. In the past, there was a rumor in the capital that guide Zhonglang, Yan Nanguang, was a henpecked husband. Now that she saw how Yan Muxia treated his wife and daughter, she realized that he had inherited his father's business. Niao Niao looked like her mother and was closest to her grandmother, Xia Qingxiu. Her personality was not as arrogant as Yan Muxia's, nor was she as lively as her mother's. Everyone said that she was very similar to Xia Qingxiu in the past. She was gentle, quiet, soft, and strong. In the 25th year after Yan He left, Niao Niao, who was 5 years old, was playing in the fu when she found a cloth bag under her grandfather's old bed. Yan He's study room had not been touched in all these years. It maintained its original appearance. Xia Qingxiu personally cleaned it every day for more than 20 years. Niao Niao slipped in when she was not paying attention. Niao Niao was small, so she went to the innermost part of the study room and found a treasure wrapped in a red cloth. Niao Niao thought about it and handed the cloth bag to Xia Qingxiu as if it was a treasure. After so many years, Xia Qingxiu's hand that was holding the red cloth trembled when she saw what Yan He had left behind. She opened the cloth bag. Sunlight came in through the window and made her squint her eyes. After so many years, she was old and her eyes were not as clear as before. She looked at it for a while before she could see clearly that it was a book with the words, "Happy Travels," written on it. The book had been stored for a long time. The pages were all yellowed. Because it was kept in the dark all day long, there was a sense of decay. Niao Niao had already been attracted by the larks outside the courtyard and ran out. Xia Qingxiu's gaze fell on the page for a long time. She finally remembered a certain spring day when she followed her cousin to the Sisui shoreline to enjoy the flowers and the book was left behind. At that time, she was only 16 years old, the best years of her life. It was at that time, in the spring, the kites by the Sisui shoreline were entangled. The young man cut off the love of the girl opposite him with a knife. He was decisive like an emotionless villain. He turned around and picked up the book she had left behind and treasured it for so many years. She slowly flipped open the book and was stunned. Unknowingly, a line of small words had been secretly written on the title page of the book. "The flowers are deep, the willows are dark. Passing through the willows and flowers, I search for the message. The husband betrays the wife." The handwriting was firm and frivolous. It was obvious that it was written by a man. She was not unfamiliar with it. It was Yan He's handwriting. Time passed quickly. In an instant, she seemed to be able to travel through many years. She saw the frivolous young man in a silver robe with a ponytail sitting in front of the table. He was biting the pen in agitation. He was almost gnashing his teeth as he wrote such a poem full of grievances and complaints on the title page. It was like a resentful woman scolding a heartless man whose heart was as hard as iron. Who would have thought that Yan He would do such a thing? Xia Qingxiu was stunned for a moment. Then, she laughed. The sunlight gently fell on her hair, blurring her white hair. Her smile was like a flower. She was like a 16-year-old girl who was moved for the first time. It was sweet and happy. That night, she saw Yan He. He was wearing a new silver robe like many years ago. He stood in front of her with an arrogant attitude. She was wearing a light yellow dress. Niao Niao stood in front of him and asked calmly, why did you take my book? The young man's arrogant expression quickly changed. He panicked. However, he tried his best to maintain his composure. He coughed lightly and said, I picked it up. It's mine. You even scribbled on it. She gently pointed out his bad behavior. Yan He's face turned even redder. He defended himself, that's not scribbling. If it's not scribbling, then what is it? It's... He fidgeted with his ponytail. His tone was a little fierce. However, there was a hint of grievance at the end of his words. It's what you think it means. Xia Qingxiu stared at him without saying a word. He was like a paper tiger. He asked, You. Why are you looking at me? Xia Qingxiu couldn't help but laugh. Yan He looked at her, not knowing what to do. After a while, he seemed to be touched by Xia Qingxiu's laughter and laughed as well. He hesitantly reached out his hand, wanting to hold Xia Qingxiu's hand. Pa, the wind blew the window loudly. Xia Qingxiu opened her eyes. Yan He wasn't there. The mattress beside her was empty. She looked at the canopy silently for a while. Then, she slowly sat up and got off the bed barefoot. It was late at night. The floor was cold. It was the 25th spring day after Yan He left. She woke up from her dream. She was so sad that she couldn't sleep. She slowly sat on the floor and buried her head in her knees. It was the first time in so many years that she cried silently. Time passed slowly. A day was also long. However, it passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, a lifetime had passed. On the 30th year after Yan He left, Xia Qingxiu passed away due to illness. Her children and grandchildren stayed by her side. This woman was quiet and gentle all her life. She was always calm and gentle. Before she died, she only handed a book to Yan Muxia and asked him to bury her with Yan He. When the coffin was buried, it was a sunny day. The kites by the Sisui River were all over the sky, and the peonies were in full bloom. It was like a day many years ago when he walked over from the long embankment full of new willows and bent down to pick up the travel notes. But inadvertently, he left behind the joyful thoughts of a young man. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.